Well, good evening, everybody. It's Saturday, good Lord, what are we? 22nd of October, and this is going to be the first in a series of videos that we're going to be doing on UK politics and politics in general. Now, you might be immediately thinking, why is he reclining back on the sofa in that sort of weird kind of way? Well, the answer is because I kind of want this series of videos to be a little bit of a parody of the sort of alt-right series of videos, which I'm sure you've seen on YouTube. You know, the ones where you have the gentleman sitting there in a very nice suit, discussing how females and feminism and SJWs and using a whole series of words that, when you actually break them down, don't really mean very much. So this video is really going to be about my view on the emergence of the alt-right, where it came from. How I feel that it is in some ways, perhaps in some ways, the start of the alt-right was a fair kind of response to some of the things that had been happening in popular culture, but how now it's very much been taken over and has been used as a vehicle for some fairly unpleasant elements. So to begin, let's focus on sort of where did the alt-right really come from. I mean, I would say that the alt-right is very much a creation of the Twitter and the internet age, or the Twitter generation and the internet age. And the reason I say that is because one of the things that Twitter has allowed to happen is that in a way that previously wasn't possible, and this is true for the internet as well generally, but Twitter is such a sort of ubiquitous platform at this point that it's definitely something that has enabled groups of people to come together in a way that perhaps they wouldn't always have been able to do so. I mean, yes, you have things like 4chan, you have Reddit, you've got and ever since the emergence of the web as we currently know it, you've had discussion forum groups and so forth. But the reason I think that Twitter is particularly not to blame, that's not really the word, not really what I want to say. Why do I think Twitter has really been the instrument that's allowed this to happen? It's actually very simple. It's because, it's mobile. You can take Twitter with you wherever you are. Whereas obviously if you wanted to sit, participate in an online discussion forum or so forth, you had to be at a desktop. You couldn't just do it on the train. You couldn't just do it, on the walk to work or so forth. Whereas Twitter, obviously, you can, engage with it in a flame war with somebody very easily just by, tweeting the wrong thing at a certain time in the morning as you're picking up your coffee on your way into the city of London or wherever it might be. So I think Twitter has provided a space in which people have been able to come into and interact and to find other people who share their views in a way that actually, I don't think necessarily we've seen before. You find yourself talking to people daily who may be on completely opposite side of the world to you and have a totally different experience of life, and yet on certain key issues you actually share a common view, and as a result you would consider them part of a kind of, I don't know, a digital peer group, if one can put it that way, which I think is fair. So where did the alt-right come from? I think it came from an understandable reaction to what was perceived as a level of attempted censorship by certain elements of what would describe itself as the progressive left. So people who were very keen on improving the rights of what they saw as disaffected groups, people who, LGBTQ, immigrant communities, women, anybody who felt, or it could be perceived that society as a whole would consider a sort of an at-risk group, disability as well. And what that itself led into, and perhaps again initially for good reasons, but I think it lost its way, was the whole concept of the social justice warrior, this sort of crypto revolting being with pink hair and all men must die, and would walk around screaming and shouting at anybody coming up with these terrible phrases that we all know and love, things like microaggressions and trigger warnings and all the rest of it, and safe spaces, etc. And as a defense to that, and if you want to sort of consider it in a biological sense, you can consider it a sort of a immune response. the alt-right appeared. The alt-right initially was all about freedom of expression. It was very much there to mock and to deride the social justice movement. But the irony is that I think over the last sort of last couple of years, and certainly over the last 18 months, the alt-right has very much become a mirror image of the social justice movement. And I think that especially pertains to the way in which many prominent alt-right members have gravitated towards or have come from certain websites, certain aspects of political thought, which are very conspiratorial, very conservative. I don't mean conservative in the traditional sense in terms of, preservation of traditional so forth, but conservative within I would say conservative almost in thinking, as in not really wanting to kind of move outside of a traditional sort of philosophical base. And Trumpism certainly has been an example of that, and I'll talk a little bit about why I think that the default approach of the alt-right to throw its support behind Trump was a serious mistake in the long term, because I'm afraid I think it's damaged the alt-right to the point where a lot of mainstream conservatives who may share their views on the pernicious aspects of the sort of inverted commas social justice movement are now holding their hands up and saying, well, this is not something we really wish to be involved with. I mean, to give you some examples of where I think it's very much gone wrong, I think it's been far too easy, and in many cases it's been accurate, to portray the alt-right as an angry group of white men, and angry because of perceived injustices or perceived, diversity policies, which in some way are seen to be anti-white male, etc. And I have to confess there have been times in my life, particularly when I was a younger man, where my politics perhaps wasn't as mature and well formed, where I sort of flirted with this perhaps. But looking at it now, I have to confess that I don't personally feel remotely threatened if a government program comes out that says actually this group of people seems to be at risk, they seem to be performing less well compared to their peers. Why don't we put a little bit of public money trying to help people? I have to confess I don't really have a problem with that at all. I don't feel as a white man that I'm remotely being attacked or in some way my position in life is being hurt if a government program comes out specifically to try to get ethnic minority women into a particular subject group. I just literally cannot be bothered about that. It doesn't affect me at all. And yet for a lot of the alt-right, it's seen as a very awful thing. But for me, as I mentioned before, I think the Trumpism in the alt-right is the area where I really take issue with it, and I think that the area where it's really gone wrong. I mean, let's first of all deal with the Gary Johnson shield, and I think it is a shield. So you've probably seen many people on Twitter, etc., prominent members of the alt-right, self-described members of the alt-right, saying that they, I hate all the candidates, and I'm going to do the moral thing. I'm a libertarian. I'm going to vote for Gary Johnson. I'm afraid I just don't buy that. I think you can easily see, if you read the timelines of a lot of these people, that they, for all of their talk about being libertarian and it's all about freedom of expression and actually it's pseudo-Trumpism. And actually, as you can see from the reactions to some of the presidential debates, when Trump was very much on the line, they tried to defend him. When the comments, the grabber by the pussy comment came out, a large number of alt-right people who were supposedly pro-Johnson suddenly came out defending Trump and saying, "Oh, it's just locker room banter, etc., etc." Which really shows you that, in my opinion, that the pro-Johnson movement, there's a joke there, pro-Johnson movement, is actually very much a screen behind which a lot of Trumpism is supported. And I would be very surprised on the day if Johnson gets anywhere like the numbers he's going to, that they expect. I think a lot of that support is going to throw itself behind Trump. Because in a way, and it's absolutely true to say that if you vote for Jill Stein or Johnson over Hillary, you are enabling Trump. Because you quite clearly are. By the same token, if you if you, I suppose, if you voted for Johnson rather than Trump, one could say you're supporting Hillary. But really, it's not real libertarianism, and they're not really libertarian in the way that they'd like to pretend. Because if you're really libertarian, things like border control, things like harsh controls on immigration, the idea of this wall to Mexico. I mean, this should make you absolutely walk back in horror as a free marketeer and a libertarian. But the fact that so many supposed libertarians on the alt-right are absolutely loving the idea really just shows you that it's just that nasty kind of hard right nationalism pretending to be something it's really not. And it's effectively just a little bit like every so often, we get told about new politics, and then some new left-wing leader like Corbynism comes along and tells us that it's all part of new politics. It's just a rehashing of old ideas that have been tried before and frankly didn't work, and are now being dredged up and sort of repackaged and put out to people. But it's the same old crap, it really is. I mean, my view is still that Hillary is going to win, but this video is not talking about Hillary. It is very much focusing on the alt-right. So what are some of the facets of the alt-right, and how can you tell if the person you're listening to very much is a member of the alt-right? I mean, there were some fairly good things not good things, but there are some facets of the way that they talk and the arguments that they make that you will immediately be able to tell. I mean, the first one is the use of the word agenda. Okay, so this is an absolute giveaway when you're listening to someone of the alt-right. What they mean by that, when you hear them talking about how this is all part of the agenda, I mean, first and foremost, as if they don't have an agenda, okay? I find it very strange to hear the number of supposedly intelligent people who criticise other people for having an agenda in a video which is political in motive. I mean, is that not an agenda? Are you not trying to spread your opinions and get your ideas across? Is that not part of your agenda? Well, quite clearly it is. So, but because it's self-evident, nobody feels the need to say it. Unless, of course, you are a member of the alt-right, in which it's all about attacking this agenda, which is coming to attack men, which is coming to spread the social justice warriors' view of the world, and oh God, it's all so terrible, we have to fight. It's madness, but it's quite indicative of the way that they operate, and the fact that your agenda is certainly one. Secondly, which is a phrase which I've heard bantered around, and this is perhaps on the more extreme level of the alt-right, but I have still heard it. It's quite remarkable when you actually you hear it. So it's the idea of white genocide. Okay, so the reason why governments, which by the way in the Western world are 90% white men, but the reason why governments in the Western world, which are 90% white men, want pro-immigration is that they have an evil plan to destroy white people by importing all of these brown people who are going to come in and marry all of the white women, and then there'll be no space for the white men to go, and they'll be kind of die out, and it'll be also terrible and evil, and everyone will become a Muslim. Yeah, they don't like Muslims. Everyone will become a Muslim, and that will be it. Now, that sounds mad, doesn't it? I mean, if you just sort of say it out loud, it sounds ridiculous. And I rather like the test that says if I tell you something and I say it out loud and it sounds stupid, it probably is. So white genocide is another thing you'll hear. I mean, it's not anywhere near as widespread as agenda, but it is something that you will hear said by people of the alt-right. There's a huge amount of mocking of the idea of safe spaces and no platform and trigger warnings. I mean, and that's that's the area where in a sense conservatives could have made common cause with the alt-right, because I personally also think those ideas are stupid. I don't believe in curtailing freedom of expression. If people want to say something, I think the best way of dealing with stupid ideas is actually to put them in a public forum and let people attack them, which is exactly what we're doing now. If you disagree with this and you want to leave a comment in the below this video, that's great. That's part of the debate. I'm not going to censor any comments on this video. I have no interest in doing it. You can call me anything you like. I really don't care. It doesn't bother me. But that's how you deal with stupid ideas. You put them out for public debate, you let other people attack them, and if they stand up to public scrutiny, they work, and if they don't, then clearly they were stupid ideas to begin with. Ideas that require protection, ideas that require safe spaces and trigger warning. I mean, all of this stuff is burning books, ultimately. I mean, you may not believe that, but every time you try to restrict knowledge, any time you try to stop people saying what they really think or how they really feel, you know, you are on a path to burning books. And it works on both sides. And we see at the moment in the UK press, for example, some of the aspects of the kind of alt-right behaviour coming in. So, for example, which itself is a parody and a mirror image of the SJW behaviour. So I'll give you a classic example. You know, you may remember some time ago that the CEO of Mozilla was forced to resign because some people found out, I believe, that he had given money to an organisation which was anti-gay marriage. And, you know, he hadn't, in his own work as Mozilla CEO, done anything, or certainly to, in any way, disenfranchise the LGBT community. But that was felt, it was felt by the sort of SJW, you know, progressive, blah, 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 that was a cardinal sin, and they pressured him into quitting his job. And, you know, the alt-right was absolutely, no, this is terrible, it's free speech, he can do what he wants. Today, the Sun newspaper in the UK has called for Gary Lineker, who, if you are not British, very, very famous England footballer, was England captain, played for Barcelona, you know, fantastic talent in his day, and a very lovely guy now, by all accounts, and also the face of Walker's Crisps. He expressed sorrow at the way that the UK press and aspects of the UK population were reacting to the idea of a small number, and let's be honest, it's a small number, of refugee children from Calais being allowed into the UK to settle, and he's now being told that he's a lefty-lovey and he must resign. It's exactly the same behaviour. It's exactly the same behaviour. And it's coming for the people who 2 years ago were all up in arms about the idea of the Mozilla CEO being forced to resign for the fact that he had given money to an organisation which had, in their view, some questionable opinions on LGBT people. How is it different? It's not different at all. And this is an example where the alt-right has lost its way. It's gone mad. It's now got to the point where, to bring another, something else that has come into the news recently, where do we get to a situation where we have, for example, you know, unarmed, you know, black African Americans being shot, and the first thing that in the street by police officers, and the very first default reaction, well, actually, the most terrible thing, actually, I would say, is this: the fact that whenever now we hear about a shooting in the US, either of a policeman on a victim or of a mass shooting, the very first thing that we now say is, and the very first question we internally ask is, what's the colour of that person's skin? Because that's the most important thing for where we are currently. The most important thing, apparently, is now that we need to know what the colour of that person's skin is. Because if you're on the SJW, if they're white, that validates your view of the fact that, you know, white men are dangerous and evil and must be contained and controlled, etc. If you're on the alt-right, you desperately want it to be someone who's Muslim, because you then can say, oh, immigration's evil, and only if we listen to Donald Trump we'll be able to get rid of it. If you're a member of Black Lives Matter, you really want the person doing the shooting to be white and to be a police officer, and you really want the person to be shot to be unarmed and black. And at no point has any of this discussion has anybody said, my God, that's terrible. Someone's just been shot. Isn't that a terrible thing? Because the alt-right has become the absolute mirror image of the SJW left. And they're welcome to each other. They are welcome to fight their battles out on the internet until the end of time, I think. But it's a good example of how something that came up as a reaction to what was perceived to be a developing ill, curtailing of freedom of expression, you know, sort of a neo-Puritanism coming from the left, has now led to a stage where the elements of the right, or specifically the alt-right, are now, you know, quite happy with the idea of a man being president who thinks it's perfectly acceptable to commit and then joke about sexual assault. I don't think it is. I think it's madness that we're in a situation like that. I don't want somebody who thinks it's all right to grab women's privates without their permission being president of the United States. And I don't want ultra-hard left feminists to be able to shut down debate on whatever topic it may be because they determine that the person who's coming to speak is, in their own view, immoral. The best example of why it's absolutely essential to allow people to speak is what happened to the BNP in the UK. When the BNP was allowed to come and put their views before the population on BBC Question Time, they were destroyed. Because people listened to what they had to say. Again, the test of, if I say this out loud, does it sound stupid? And they fell apart, and they never recovered from that. It was supposed to be their great big, movement to power. But actually, the moment you put their ideas before the British people, the vast majority of whom are sensible, well, Brexit, maybe, but generally are quite sensible, they were just torn to pieces. And I think that's how it should be with any ideological view. We do best when we're pragmatic. We do best when we're centrist. The most important thing is to be in a situation where you can take a majority of sensible, decent people with you. SJW left, alt-right, we don't really want either of them. We don't want women being taught that men are evil and demonising them. And we don't want men who think that grabbing a woman, sexually provocative, grabbing a woman's genitals without her permission is fine and banter and that's acceptable kind of behaviour. We don't want either. We don't want Neo-Puritanism. We don't want lad culture. We don't want safe spaces. We don't want, people creating, people taking, pornography and putting, the faces of people on it and then tweeting it to them. I mean, I have seen some horrendous things come out of the alt-right. I've seen people posting photographs where they've masturbated over somebody, or photographs of they've masturbated over the photograph of someone, calling everybody who disagreed with them a faggot. On the other side, I've been called a monster because I disagree with a particular tenant of SJW. Both of these people are mad, okay? My suggestion to you as a sensible viewer is leave them to it. Come into the centre ground, okay? Be pragmatic, be sensible, debate the issue, and come to a reasonable opinion and solution that actually ultimately leaves everybody slightly cross, because the best compromises are the ones where everyone thinks they've lost. Okay? Nobody should be happy with a compromise. Nobody should be happy in the centre ground. It should always make everyone angry, because at least that means that all of the fringes have lost something. And that for us in the centre ground, who are trying to maintain something akin to normality in this incredible, nasty year that is 2016, it means that at least we're going in the right direction. So, beware of the alt-right. Don't get taken in by them. Okay? They're not your friend. They'll try and pretend that you're your friend. They'll try and pretend that it's really a huge government-led conspiracy to destroy the white male and replace us all with, SJW warriors and blah, 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 blah. But they're talking balls. And don't forget this, right? All of these kind of sites, and I won't mention them, but you know the ones I mean. Sitting there behind the camera talking about the evil SJW agenda. You do realise that all of these people make an enormous amount of money out of you watching their videos, right? You think those ads that you have to click through are there for no reason? They are making a fortune off you. You buy the weird t-shirts, you buy whatever they're promoting. Every 5 minutes they're stopping to say, and this is brought to you by this will, help protect you from nuclear war and da-da-da-da-da. You do realise that they're making a fortune out of you. Be smart, right? If they've got ads on their video, it's most likely because they're making money. And every time you click, every time you go through, you just give them a little bit more dollar. Just a little bit more. Don't feed the troll. Stay safe. Have a fantastic weekend. And I'll see you all soon.